for any delegation, government delegation to travel to another country, you need an agenda to go by. There was no agenda at all. So therefore, it was largely technical. I have to find the correct official on the Indian side so that the kind of things that I wanted to discuss, for which I needed an agenda. There was no agenda shared with us. Agenda was shared at the last moment, I believe, even after the flight would have departed. So it was nothing to do with it. I think it was pre-planned. They knew that the visa cannot be issued in half an hour to an hour, and therefore they did it. I think it was absolutely politically motivated.
Well, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow ORF, is with us this evening. Ray Locker, author and journalist, joins us, and so does Terry Milewski, author and commentator, and also leading a think tank in Canada. Namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. Ray Locker, how would you assess this situation? Because the recalled ambassador is citing what perhaps is an open secret. The other question is that it cannot be just Trudeau who's doing this. There have to be other elements who are deliberately pushing these kind of entities or extremists under the garb of FOE or freedom of expression. Because that doesn't extend to journalists who are saying their piece. There's been a crackdown otherwise. And it doesn't extend to Pakistan ISI operating there, the Chinese MSS operating on Canadian soil. Sri Lankans worried about the LTT finding safe haven. The Israelis have now raised concerns that Hezbollah, Hamas cadre are getting an open ticket in Canada.
Well, this is something that's happened in a variety of countries when you have exile communities that live there and have influence with the government of those countries. You know, I've worked on stories involving, Middle Eastern extremists who live in the United Kingdom, who support people in the United States, who are charged with terrorism. So I'm not surprised that there are these allegations surrounding the Khalistani community in Canada. I mean, when you have a group of people who live in a country and have access to government officials, their words get heard. And it's rather surprising to me that India doesn't have more leverage with the Canadians, but that often happens. I mean, you have exile groups around the world who got kicked out of whatever country they came from, and they grow in influence in the countries that they now live in. And so all of this is pretty much part of a textbook that happens in a variety of places.
And Balraj Nijjar, Hardeep Nijjar's son, confirmed that the RCMP and the Canadian intelligence actually had warned them, and they were in continuous touch, or consistent touch. So Ambassador Sanjay Verma only echoing the same, Sushant Sareen.
Yeah, I think on the Indian side, there have been reports in the Indian media where Indian officials feel that not just in Canada but also in the United States, the kind of long rope which is given to, for example, in the US to Pannu, or in Canada to all these Khalistani thugs, is done because they're part of they are like assets. Now, yes, it is true that there are many countries where there are these kind of communities which do develop some degree of influence. But I think there is another side to the story, which is that many countries, the UK in particular, actually cultivate some of these elements because it also gives them courage to carry out their own foreign policy. Qatar nowadays is a prime example. All the despicable elements from all across the Islamic world come and congregate in Qatar and are given space to operate from there. So if the Taliban want to talk, then they will be in Qatar and they are given a place to from where they can carry out negotiations. Hamas is there. You name the group, they are there, right? So there are countries which actually do this. Now, maybe in the case of Canada, it's partly for political reasons, partly they're trying to do certain leverages. There is domestic political considerations and international leverages. I don't know what exactly it might be. But look, the reason, Anand, there are these questions which are being raised or suspicions that are being voiced is because of the kind of long rope which is given to these guys. Now, it's the same Canada which has just banned another organization, a Middle Eastern organization in Canada, partly because of the kind of hate speech they've been making, partly because they've been burning flags and all kinds of other things they've been doing. How does it apply to them and not to the Khalistani guys? There's no explanation. Trudeau comes and feels brave enough to say that, whenever the Indians have given information, I've taken action. He has not cited a single instance in which any action has been taken against any of these characters.
Correct.
So obviously questions will then be raised, and then you have the RCMP acting with the kind of alacrity, confessing that there was no imminent danger, no imminent threat, and yet on a weekend, not just a weekend, I think it was the one of their occasions which these guys celebrate out there, Thanksgiving, I believe. On that weekend, when everybody's on a holiday, these guys come out and hold this press conference.
Yes.
When there's nothing, there's no imminent danger, there's no threat, they come out and do it. And then the entire sequence of events that the High Commissioner has recounted, that on the day they want to travel, they send in a visa requests. Would the Canadians or the Americans or any other country do the same, for example, if India was to apply for these kind of visas? No, they won't.
Yeah.
So what is this kind of
No, with respect to David Coleman Headley, it took more than 6.5 to 7 months, if my memory serves me right, if not more, for even India to secure permission or the ability to access David Coleman Headley and to interrogate him. And it was in the full view of the FBI, and it was all the Americans watching all the proceedings like a hawk. So that's there. That's one part. But Terry, how would you want to respond to what the ambassador has said and also what Sushant is saying?
Well, as bad as they make it sound, it may be worse. I've been following this for more than 20 years, and the influence, the insidious influence of separatist fanatics, extremists, or just plain activists, if you like, upon successive governments in Canada has been really quite alarming and very hard to explain. I'm thinking, for example, of the 2015 election, which brought Justin Trudeau to power, in which the former president of the World Sikh Organization was picking liberal candidates, not the local writing association, who were imposing candidates approved by the former president of the World Sikh Organization, which is a separatist organization. I don't say they're violent at all, but I do say that they're separatists. That's part of their constitution. Or I'm thinking of Trudeau's absurd trip to India in 2018. Where a former convicted Khalistani terrorist, actually convicted of attempted murder, was invited to a couple of glittering diplomatic receptions in Mumbai and in New Delhi, posing for selfies with the Prime Minister's wife. Nobody in the Prime Minister's entourage, not Trudeau or any of his brilliant advisors or his MPs, nobody thought that this might be a little much to invite such a to a dinner in New Delhi. I mean, that is so clueless, it's hard to believe. So how do they get this oversized influence? And why is it just the liberal answer? It is not just liberal. One more example, briefly, if I may.
Sure.
I can remember in going back to 2007 now, a Vaisakhi parade in Surrey, British Columbia, featuring glamorous posters glorifying the Air India bomber, Sarvinder Pawar, who's a great hero of the sequence, a martyr, and so forth. And MPs from all parties were there, smile and wave and hustle for votes. And then interviewing them later, said, what do you think about these posters? I mean, isn't that a little much? And they said, well, we didn't realize.
True.
We were flabbergasted, said one of them. We were flabbergasted to see that. So he didn't approve of it, right? Great. Wrong. Because he changed his view after the Conservative Party head office. The Prime Minister Stephen Harper, a Conservative, was in power at the time. They called those MPs and said, no, don't say that. Don't say you're flabbergasted. Don't antagonize the Khalistani. You've got to reverse your position. They had to climb down and say, no, we weren't flabbergasted. Oh, nothing wrong with this. No problem here. So this influence is powerful, and it crosses party lines. And don't get me started on Jagmeet Singh, upon whom we'll know the Trudeau government has depended for its survival thus far.
True.
And that, of course, is coming to an end. And Trudeau's probably toast anyway, as you also know. And that was true before this all.
No, see, if you look at the WSO, Ray Locker, and there is a complex flowchart. It's second generation, third generation of the original group of Khalistani terrorists who fled India, who are now part of the polity, not just in Canada, but they are also entrenched into the administration and policy framework in the US. Now, the other question is, many ask that Israel will not be able to flex this kind of muscle had America not backed it. The same way, does it also apply to Canada? That Canada would not be able to take these positions and make these utterances had it not got a tacit backing of the US. So what is US's interest? Or is US deliberately playing this good cop, bad cop game? But on the one hand, they want to continue to engage with India and improve relations, while on the other hand, they want to keep fiddling India via Canada.
Well, I don't really think that's true, but I don't know for sure. Obviously, U.S. and Canadian intelligence work with each other on a variety of things. I mean, we're both English-speaking countries, and there's been a natural tendency to work together. But I also know inside intelligence agencies around the world, there's a healthy skepticism of what comes from other countries, as there should be. I mean, we look at what happened 20 years ago with the Iraq War and some of the bad intel we got from around the world, and we got gulled into starting that war, and we shouldn't have. So I don't know about the specifics. I certainly hope the United States is not using Canada to meddle with India, because it's not in the U.S. best interests. I think there's a natural sympathy towards some exile groups who feel like they've been done wrong by whatever country they came from. But I think that is extremely naive, because these people are up to no good sometimes, and you got to look at them with extreme scrutiny. Also, you have to take with a grain of salt what other countries like India say. You know, these people are bad. We don't know, but you have to research it. And you can't just take somebody's assurance that everything is good or everything is bad. You got to do your own work.
Okay. Now, if there is an Interpol Red Corner notice against an individual who's been refused citizenship or entry into a country thrice, and there is also the case that this person is designated a terrorist by nations, he's committed acts of heinous crime and is a known gangster. Now, if you were to be sitting in the immigration cell, Ray Locker, would you admit such a person in your country, grant that person residency and citizenship?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's a good reason for all that evidence that's been built up against that person.
So the Red Corner notice comes in 2016, and in 2018, 2019, Hardeep Nijjar gets Canadian citizenship and entry into Canada. And this is the person who's dead on Canadian soil, and he's mourned in the Canadian House, in the Canadian Parliament, without a single ounce of credible proof, Sushant Sareen, that he's been done in by foreign entities or by a government outside of Canada. This is the current state of affairs in Canada. Goldie Barar is active in Canada. Arsh Dalla was warned by the RCMP and the CSIS that there is a threat to him. Hardeep Nijjar, a wanted person with a Red Corner notice on Interpol. Goldie Barar has a Red Corner notice. Arsh Dalla has a Red Corner notice and letter rogatory submitted to Canada. And they were all operating on Canadian soil, Sushant Sareen. So if this is not deliberate, then what is? And why is Canada doing it? What's in Canada's interest if the US is not the one that's propping Canada up and asking it to do it? Final word.
So on that one level, you can excuse Canada, because after all, if they can call a Nazi to their parliament and then, show him around as though he was some kind of a freedom fighter, then surely, they can call a Khalistani and they can defend him. So maybe it's just the system. But on a more serious note, there are very serious charges against these guys. And it's not as though, for example, the American intelligence agencies or any other intelligence agency is not aware of the antecedents and of the actions that some of these guys have been accused of, and what are the kind of things these guys are involved in.
Right.
Now, if CSIS or the CIA or the FBI are such solid organizations, such kick-ass organizations, then how come they're not aware of the links of these guys with drug trafficking networks, with human trafficking networks, with gun running networks, with criminal gangs? How come they're not aware of all of this? Correct. If the FBI is so good, then how come they've not been able to track down the people who have attacked the Indian consulates, not on one occasion, but on two occasions? Right. They've kept kept quiet about it? How come they're not able to get to the bottom of who is attacking, for example?
Fair point.
Because that would include hate speech. Hindu temples, for example.
Right.
How come they're not able to
No,
get
vandalism,
to the bottom?
arson is all crossing the line. FOE does not allow vandalism, arson, but there have been no arrests. And if it is there is an instigator who's asking people to do it, then that also is on the wrong side of the law. Anyways, gentlemen, we'll take this conversation forward soon. But thank you for your time. I've run out of time here on the right stand. Russ Tax with Zako Jacob right now. Stay with us.